soon as the manager heard what was going on, he called HR and he said, I want you to go immediately, and he called a player in and had a translator. I want you to go immediately with somebody from HR who speaks Spanish into the hospital. And he dismissed the player right there. They went, picked up the girl, got her to a hospital. Turned out she had a virus. And once that was detected, they knew the antibodies to use. And she began to improve. And what do you think that kid's batting average did? The better she got, the higher it got. And here's the really sweet spot. That kid won Rookie of the Year and went on to a very successful major league career. Now, what would have happened if that manager didn't find out really what the problem was? Yeah, that kid would have been sent down, huh? Would that girl have gotten any better? No, she probably would have died. And do you think he would have had any future as a Major League Baseball player? No. So here was the difference between, and you're right, an average manager would have just shipped the kid down. That's what you do. But he defined the problem, and he got the solution right. Because if you don't have the problem right, you have no hope of getting the solution right. So once the problem's right, now you can understand what's causing the problem. Well, he figured that out pretty fast. What are the solutions? All right, I said there's two things that experts do, and here's the other thing. Implement and evaluate solutions. See, it's plural. Most of us, especially poor decision makers, come up with one solution and we implement it. We've gone through it, we defined it, we recognize the problem's causing it, here's the solution, let's do it. And if you're a poor decision maker, you get your ego wrapped up into it, and so what you begin to do is you take ownership over that, pride in that, so it can't change. No, great decision makers are more focused on the results. So if that first solution didn't work, let's pull in another one. And if that doesn't work, let's pull in another one. Effective decision makers are really good at ending a plan and picking up another one, or modifying a plan, because they want to guide it. They realize that it is a process. It's not an if-or. And so that's what they do, and they're constantly evaluating their solutions. So before they implement something, they're often willing to say something like, okay, this sounds like a good solution to this problem, but now give me another one. What would be plan B if this didn't work out? Good. If we have time, how about plan C? So I don't know about you, but I can tell you about my world, plan A hardly ever works out the way I think it's going to. So it's nice to have plan B there as a backup. And sometimes when I go A, B, and C, I look at them and I think, maybe I'll take a little bit of this and I'll come up with plan D, and that's even better than plan A. And so that's a difference too. So between defining the problems and implementing and evaluating is a big difference. All right, how about strategic thinking? This is what helps us set priorities. What are the major, for example, performance indicators for this project? What is going to help us really think this project was successful? That's a priority. By the way, they're also really good at saying, that's not a priority, we're not giving it any attention. So once you have the priority set, then we know what resources to commit. What are we going to need to make this happen? And then finally, we use these kind of decision making to direct action. The process isn't all that different than what problem solving is. So what I wanted to share with you today is what the research says about leaders who make the best strategic decisions. Because many of you are in a leadership role or will be in a leadership role. Even when you're just a participant, you do have a leadership role. So first of all, they use real-time information. They want to know the latest information that's possible, and they don't rely on history or traditions, if you will. Give me the latest you got on this particular factor. They integrate decisions. They know, for example, well, if I take this person off that project and put them on this project, there's going to be a hole there. Can I live with that? Or is there some other way to do that? If I allocate certain funding from here, I'm going to have to borrow from, and I love this expression, I'm going to have to borrow from Peter to pay Paul. All right? To me, that's a good decision. But you integrate decisions. You realize that when you move one ball, they're all going to move. Consensus with qualification. To me, this is key for great strategic decision makers. We're in a team. We're sitting together, right? Somebody has to be the major person responsible. Somebody. Whether that's appointed or elected, somebody is most responsible. So what we're going to do, let's say it was me in this particular case, and this was our team. I want to hear from all of you. What's your opinion on this? Because I want consensus. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Ultimately, the decision is mine. Because ultimately, the responsibility is mine. If things go left or downhill, I'm the one that will take the blame. And if you're a good leader, you will. Because you will say, look, I was in charge of this. And then you also know if you're a good leader and things go right, and you hope they do, you give credit. But here's the qualification. I'm going to take everybody's opinion, and they're not all going to be the same, and then I'm going to make what is in the decision that I think is in the best interest of our team. And I will make that announcement. And then I will also say, I know that disagrees with some of you in here, but ultimately the responsibility is mine, and I'm doing what I think is in the best interest. And I'm going to guess if I said that to you, you would be okay with it. Because if the roles were reversed, I'd understand it too. And I would appreciate the fact that you asked my opinion, and you really weighed it. And that's consensus with qualification. If you're making a strategic decision, here's why that's so critical. Because it's strategic, it's a mission. And you want all the team members committed to that mission. That's what great teams do. Do you think the Kansas City Chiefs kind of have some consensus about what they want to do? Yes, they do. Not just about offense and defense, but the quality of their character, the kinds of people they want to be. They're on board with that. And then here's the final thing. Consider multiple alternatives all at the same time. So if you've got a couple of plans that you're considering, put them next to each other. Right next to each other if you can physically, but at least mentally, and will reveal something. Let me demonstrate that for you. Is anybody that's redecorated their home recently? Think about, okay, yeah. So let's say you're redecorating your home and you want to include some artwork. So you walk into an art dealer. There's an art dealer right there. And he or she says to you, so what kind of paintings or art would you like? And you say, I'd like oil paintings, and I like nature oil paintings. In particular, sunrises, sunsets, those kinds of things. What colors are you working with? And so you tell him. And he says, okay, I think I've got some oil paintings for you. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to take this home and hang it up for a week. See how you like it. Then bring it back. And then I'm going to give you another one. Take this home. See how you like it. Bring it back. Now, third one. Take this home. How do you like it? Bring it back. All right, which of those three do you want? Now, what if I did this? Consider multiple alternatives simultaneously. What if I gave you all three? So take them home. Put them up. Which one do you like? It becomes much more clear in terms of your ability to analyze what you like and make a decision. Consider multiple alternatives simultaneously. All right, how about predicting the future? If I could ask you what you would like to predict the future on, probably it would run the gamut. But for most of us, we want to be able to know how successful are we going to be with our actions that we're taking. And remember I said analytic decisions require two things. They require data and they require detail. So when you're trying to predict the future, it's helpful if you have a series of data points. It's also helpful if you have contributing factors. Let me demonstrate this for you. This comes from a study that was published earlier this year. All right, it's hours that your screens are on per day. The bottom is your television. Now, this is average America. All right. If you notice back in 2010, you probably had a television on for about 4.5 hours a day. Did that change very much in 2011? Yeah, it went up a little bit, stayed the same in 2012. 2013 declined a little bit. You look 2015, and it's actually starting to go on a downward trend. We know that the average American actually turns their television on less than they used to in the past. And here's the other trend we know, is that people are not buying as many televisions. Because bump up one line, that's your computer. Notice back in 2010, you had it on a little more than 7 hours. right? By the fact that you hit 2015, it hasn't really changed very much. Right? You still have it on the same amount of time. Now, we do know that you're probably web surfing a little more and using a little more email. So what really has changed? Look at the top line. That's your smartphone. 2010, you probably had it on maybe about a little over 7 hours, 7.5 hours. By the time you hit 2015, it was on 10 hours. What direction do you think this trend is heading? Up. Right. John, I know you work in a university. I don't know if this happens to you. I walk down the hall. I work in a building called the Ramsey Center. That's where my office is. I walk down the hall, and the undergraduates are sitting in the hallway, and you'll see like 6 of them around a smartphone, watching Hulu, Netflix, whatever it might be. Right? And I'm thinking, can't you get a television? They don't own televisions, right? They're watching it all here. It's all going to be on the smartphone. So if you wanted to get a message out to your people, right, or let's say you were in advertising, what medium would you use? Obviously, you'd probably use a television. Right? Think about this conference. Used to be you'd get a handout, right, with a lot of the information. It's now on the smartphone. It's on an app. The schedule's there. Bios of speakers are there. Devin was even using it to read my introduction. Right? So much is going towards that direction. So here's the data points telling us that that's where the direction is in the future. All right. What about contributing factors? We often use this for similar kinds of decisions. Contributing factors means the more you have of something, the better off you're going to be. We often use it when we're trying to hire somebody. So what are you looking for in a person? Well, we need this level of education. We need at least a bachelor's degree, for example. Would love to have them PMI certified. We need at least 5 years experience. We need somebody with these skill sets. They need to be a good communicator. They need to be able to use certain statistical packages or certain software programs. We need somebody with these kinds of personality characteristics. Now, who are you going to hire? In most cases, it's the person that has most of those factors. That's called contributing factors. So the more factors you have, the better you can predict this person's success in the job. And that works with most things we have. Now, wanted to use this as an example. Let's say you wanted to broadcast a message of some kind to a certain audience. And they might be millennials, or they might be Gen X, or they might be the old people, the baby boomers. Well, baby boomers are easy. If you wanted to get a message to baby boomers, almost exclusively, you use Facebook. Do you realize baby boomers use Facebook to that degree? They hardly ever use Twitter. Instagram for them is non-existent. Snapchat is non-existent. Pinterest, maybe a little for a recipe now and then. Google Plus, they use that, interestingly enough. I wonder what they use it for. Not a lot, but they do use it some. And yes, they also use YouTube. So if you were, again, contributing factors, trying to get a message to these people, certainly Facebook presence would be a big one. You might want to throw in Google Plus, and you might want to do YouTube. Now, what if you wanted to hit millennials? They're a little more savvy when it comes to social media. Look at their use of Facebook. All right, it's about half of what the baby boomers and the Gen Xers use. But look at their Instagram accounts and their Snapchats. And yeah, they use YouTube a lot. So what medium would you need to reach the message to them? You'd need multiple ones. So here's where contributing factors can help you understand what level of success you will have with your project. Now, the more skillful project managers in here would know what those data points needed to be. And I'm going to guess it's going to be things like resources and personnel and so forth. And you will, yes, please.
What about LinkedIn?
LinkedIn wasn't part of this study. This wasn't my study. Yeah. I think that's a great question. It wasn't in that study. Yeah. In fact, I hadn't even thought of it when you said that. Network preferences. And I would think LinkedIn would be pretty high up there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. But no, this study just showed that. Yeah. And that's one of the downsides of being a researcher. You can only present what data you've got. But that's a great point. All right, I want to switch now from analytic decisions into intuitive decisions. It has been for years a little understood phenomena, but there's been more and more research done on it, particularly from the area of neuroscience. One of my favorite quotes comes from my grandfather here, Albert Einstein. He said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." And I think he's spot on with this next sentence. We've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. We prize analytic thinking. Have you ever received feedback, and I'm sure you have, that somebody says to you, "That was very well thought out"? Very few times will you ever hear, "What a great intuitive decision that was." In fact, I was interviewing a very successful college coach. I won't tell you the sport. And one of the things that I had said about this person in a presentation was, her first name was Linda. I said, "Linda was a brilliant intuitive thinker." And she came up to me afterwards and thanked me for that. And I said, "Linda," by the way, she had won 21 national championships. I said, "You're thanking me for that?" And she goes, "I was always embarrassed to tell people where my thinking was." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I would often have this intuitive idea, but I couldn't explain why. And everybody wanted an explanation. Why did you do this? Because here are some of the characteristics that are associated with intuitive thinking." By the way, Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in economics because he did a brilliant job of integrating fast thinking and slow thinking. And if you think back to those brain images, that's exactly what he was talking about. Because sometimes we do need fast thinking, and that's the intuitive, not the emotional thinking. That's where we're going next. And we also need the slow thinking. That's the analytic thinking. How many of you in here have read that book or seen the book? Nobody? I will tell you this, you could probably read one chapter and get the whole book, so I wouldn't invest in it, just my own opinion. By the way, academics tend to be very poor writers, I will admit that. And Kahneman, I think, is at Harvard. They're even worse. All right, intuitive decision. Here's three characteristics. First, it requires little or no conscious effort. All right? Little effort, no conscious effort. In other words, you get a gut feeling, and it's true, you feel it in your gut. I know you all have had intuitive decisions at some point, or intuitive feelings. You just get a sense that something is right, or you get a sense that something is wrong. And I'll give you an example. If you have been living in your home for 10 years or longer and haven't made any changes, we could send somebody to your house. We'll send John and a couple other people, and they could move one piece of furniture. Let's say if you have a coffee table, they move the coffee table even 1 inch, boom. You walk into, let's say it's in the living room, you walk into the living room, something won't feel right. Have you ever experienced this? Yes, something just doesn't feel right. You don't know what it is. Or sometimes somebody comes into your office and they're looking for a job or a responsibility, and you just get an intuitive feeling, something right about this person. Let me give you one more example. You're going shopping for a birthday gift or a holiday gift of some kind, and you see something, a bottle of water. And you just know intuitively, John would love that bottle of water for his birthday present. You never talked to John about it. Right? He never mentioned it to you, but you just know this is the right thing. So you buy the water, you wrap it up, you give it to John for his birthday, and boom. How did you know I wanted this water? Intuitively, you did. So there is something about intuition that's important. It comes to you very fast. Now, how do you know if it's any good? You're confident. You just know. The more unshakable that feeling is, the stronger that intuitive thought is probably correct. You just know. And here's the difference between great decision makers and mediocre decision makers. Most mediocre decision makers, when they get that intuitive feeling, they will not go with it. I can't do it because I can't explain it. Fortunately, Linda knew that it was a good decision. She was very confident. She couldn't explain it, so she didn't want to talk to the press about it, but She went with it anyways. All right, where does it come from? This is important for you to know. If you think back to those brain images, in most cases it comes from the right side of the brain, if you will, the creative side. But the fireworks don't go off quite like they do in an emotional sense. So you don't get that repression of the analytic abilities in an intuitive sense. And it comes from a pattern recognition, which means that you have to have extensive experience. When I said to you, you've lived in your house for a while, so you have experience there. You know the patterns that are present. So when we moved one of those things out of place, that pattern wasn't complete the way you were familiar with it. It wasn't an analytic thought. You didn't say to yourself, something's not right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chairs there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chairs there. 2 tables, 3 tables. You didn't do that kind of a process. That's analytic. Something felt wrong. Right? You can learn to be more intuitive by being more observant of environments. Let me give you one example. How many of you go to meetings on a regular basis? Okay, good. Notice how people interact at meetings, and then notice how they interact with you individually. Just notice. Because sometimes in meetings, people bring a political agenda. I know that shocks all of you. Right? They bring a political agenda or a social agenda. So sometimes they feel like they have to be important and share something. Or sometimes they're a little internal. They're a little, they're a little private. They don't want to expose themselves that way. But they'll come to you after the meeting and say, I think this is a really good idea. So watch how they interact with other people, then watch how they interact with you. And you'll begin to see patterns. And it'll help you understand that person. And here's why it's important. That's a person you work with. That's a person who might have great ideas. One of the things that I do, because I'm in the area of sports, is I consult with a couple of professional teams. One of them is the Atlanta Hawks basketball team in the NBA. The head coach is Mike Budenholzer. And one of the things Bud does that I love is that when he has a coaches meeting, which he does before every game and before every practice, he'll go over what the game plan is or what the practice plan is. And then he wants every one of those coaches to speak, and he wants them to speak honestly. And sometimes, especially the younger coaches, they don't want to say anything. And the reason they don't want to say anything is same reason you didn't want to raise your hand in 4th grade and say, I don't understand the math you're trying to teach me. They didn't want to proclaim their ignorance. But Bud has gotten through that. So it's like, tell me what you're thinking. I don't really understand why they're running this offense. And here's Bud's opinion of it. Tell me what you're thinking. So now I know I had to explain it a little bit better to you. Now you understand it. Second question, do you agree with it? And tell me, honestly, yes or no. And you might say no. Why don't you agree with it? I want to hear that. And Bud knows this by watching people. So sometimes he'll see somebody sit with their legs and arms crossed, and he knows automatically that person disagrees with what I'm doing. Tell me what you're thinking. And so intuitively, he knows when things are going right and when things are going wrong. When I've talked to other coaches that have worked with him, they call him the best timeout coach in the NBA. In other words, we're going to call a timeout, come together, but automatically knows what to tell these players, sends them out, and they're fairly successful with it. That's a tough skill. And he does it mostly, he says, intuitively. He knows what to say. So the conclusions are based on impressions, not on connecting or collecting data points. So what I've just shared with you is basically 2 important ways to think, intuitively and analytically. Now I want to bring them together under pressure. How many of you feel like your job is just like this? You spend every day putting out little fires, and then every once in a while, one of those fires just ignites and blows up in ways you did not anticipate. What do? The pressure's on. All right, here's what we know by studying people who make great decisions under pressure. And by the way, there are some people who make better decisions when the pressure's on And as soon as I said that, I know there's a few people in this room and say, yep, that's me. I do better with a deadline, or I do better when I know this has to be done right. They do better under pressure than when they have all the time and resources in the world. There are some people who do that. They're a minority of people. Right? But here's how successful leaders make great decisions under pressure. By the way, both these presentations I've converted into a PDF format. John's going to download them right after this presentation, and they will be available. So you will have exactly what's up here, if you'd like it. First of all, they mix the analytic and the intuitive. But this is really important, the order. They have an intuitive feeling. Did they immediately go with it? No. If they've got time, they will back up and they'll do the analysis. They'll see if the data supports the intuitive feeling. Again, remember, intuition comes from pattern recognition. Analytics comes from data in detail. When you can combine the both, it's powerful. It's a great way to make decisions. And so when the pressure is on and you have to produce, by the way, if there's no intuitive feeling there, there's no intuitive feeling. Go with the analytic. But if you feel in your gut something is right or wrong, look at the data honestly and openly and see if it supports it. Next, prioritize the most important problems. Something's gone very, very wrong with your project. And then one of your project members comes in and says to you, well, listen, I won't be able to be here this week because I don't think my dog is feeling that well, so I'm going to stay home with my dog and take a few sick days. That's not an important problem. Don't focus on that. Let me give you one that's a little more specific. One of the things I used to do was I was a performance